The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, cream-colored with elegant script that screamed, expensive. Julia Price held it like it contained gold, her manicured fingers tracing the embossed lettering. Westfield High School class of 1995, 30th reunion. I watched from the kitchen doorway, coffee mug in hand, as my wife's face lit up with an expression I hadn't seen in months, maybe years. "Oh my God, Adam," she breathed, tearing open the invitation with the enthusiasm of a kid on Christmas morning. "It's finally here. The reunion is next Saturday at the Grand Meridian downtown." I set down my mug and walked over, genuinely interested. After 22 years of marriage, I thought I knew most of Julia's high school stories. The cheerleading squad, the drama club, the time she got detention for sneaking out during lunch, normal teenage stuff that we'd laugh about over dinner. "Sounds fun," I said, reading over her shoulder. "Black tie optional. Should I rent a tux, or will my good suit work?" The silence that followed felt like ice water down my spine. Julia's smile faltered, and she carefully folded the invitation, not meeting my eyes. "Actually, honey, I was thinking maybe I should go alone this time." "Alone?" The word came out sharper than I intended. "Why would you go alone? Spouses are welcome, right?" She fidgeted with her wedding ring, spinning it around her finger, a nervous habit I'd noticed more frequently lately. "It's just, you know how these things are. Everyone asking questions, catching up on old times. It might be easier if I could just focus on reconnecting with people without having to, Without having to what, Julia?" She sighed, finally looking at me with those green eyes that had captivated me since college. But now they held something I couldn't quite identify. Embarrassment? Shame? "Look, Adam, don't take this the wrong way, but I'm embarrassed to introduce you as my husband." The words hit like a physical blow. I actually took a step backward, my hand gripping the kitchen counter for support. "Embarrassed?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "Of me?" Julia's face immediately softened, and she reached out to touch my arm. No, that came out wrong. I meant... Oh God, I don't know what I meant. I just said boyfriend instead of husband earlier, and it felt weird, and... You said boyfriend? It was a slip of the tongue. I was talking to Kara about it yesterday, and the words got mixed up. You know how my brain works when I'm excited. I stared at her, trying to process what I was hearing. Julia was a senior account executive at Morrison & Associates, one of the city's top advertising agencies. She didn't mix up words. Ever. Her living depended on precise communication. "So let me get this straight," I said slowly. "You told your best friend that you were embarrassed to introduce your husband, at your high school reunion?" I didn't say embarrassed to Kara. That was just now, and I misspoke again. God, Adam, why are you making this such a big deal? Because something was wrong. Deeply, fundamentally wrong. In 22 years of marriage, Julia had never been embarrassed by me. Annoyed, sure. Frustrated when I left dishes in the sink or forgot to take out the trash. But embarrassed? I was 43 years old, a logistics manager at Hartwell Distribution. Not glamorous, but steady. Good benefits, decent salary, respected by my colleagues. I kept myself in shape, still had most of my hair, and according to our kids, I was actually pretty cool for a dad. "What exactly would embarrass you about introducing me?" I asked. Julia's jaw tightened. "Nothing, Adam. You're being ridiculous. I just want one night to myself, okay? Is that too much to ask after 22 years of marriage?" The conversation was spiraling, and I could feel her pulling away, building walls I didn't understand. This wasn't about wanting a night alone. This was about something else entirely. "Fine," I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Go alone. Have fun catching up with everyone." Relief flooded her features. "Really? You're not mad?" "Not mad," I lied. Just confused. She kissed my cheek, a quick peck that felt more like gratitude than affection. "You're the best, honey. I promise I'll make it up to you." As she headed upstairs to get ready for work, I stood in the kitchen replaying the conversation. Something about her reaction felt rehearsed, like she'd been preparing for this moment. The way she'd avoided eye contact, the nervous ring spinning, the immediate defensiveness when I asked questions, and that slip about boyfriend. Julia never made slips like that. I pulled out my phone and called my best friend Dave, who worked in the same building as me but handled different accounts. "Hey man," Dave answered on the second ring. "What's up? Quick question. If Sarah wanted to go to her high school reunion alone, how would you react?" Dave laughed. I'd assumed she was planning to hook up with her ex-boyfriend and start preparing divorce papers. "Why?" The casual way he said it made my stomach clench. Julia doesn't want me to come to hers. The line went quiet for a moment. Seriously? She said she was embarrassed to introduce me as her husband. Jesus, Adam, that's... Dave paused, choosing his words carefully. That's not normal. Yeah, I'm starting to figure that out. You want my advice? Follow her. I can't spy on my wife, Dave. Why not? If she's got nothing to hide, you'll feel stupid for an hour and then go home. If she does have something to hide, you need to know. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the reunion invitation Julia had left behind. The Grand Meridian. Next Saturday, 7 o'clock. For the rest of the week, I watched Julia more carefully. She'd always been social, always on her phone, but now I noticed patterns I'd somehow missed before. Text messages that made her smile in ways I hadn't seen in months. Phone calls she'd take in the other room, speaking in hushed tones. Late nights at the office that seemed to be happening more frequently. On Thursday, I overheard her talking to Kara in the living room while I was in the kitchen. I just can't wait to see him again, Julia was saying, her voice filled with an excitement that made my chest tight. It's been so long, and from his Facebook posts, he looks amazing. Are you sure about this? Kara asked. I mean, what about Adam? What about him? It's just a reunion, Kara. People catch up with old friends all the time. Old friends don't usually make you glow like this, Jules. Julia laughed, a sound I used to love but now made me feel sick. You're being dramatic. Besides, Adam doesn't need to know every detail of my past. Just be careful, okay? Some doors shouldn't be reopened. Some doors were never properly closed. I gripped the edge of the counter, my knuckles white. Whatever this was about, it wasn't innocent catching up with classmates. Saturday evening arrived with the kind of crisp October air that made everything feel sharp and clear. Julia spent 2 hours getting ready, longer than she'd spent preparing for anything in recent memory. She chose a black cocktail dress I'd never seen before, did her makeup with professional precision, and sprayed herself with perfume that wasn't her usual scent. You look beautiful, I said as she came downstairs, and I meant it. She looked like the woman I'd fallen in love with in college, radiant and confident and alive. Thank you, she said, but her smile seemed distant. I probably won't be too late. Maybe midnight. Take your time. Have fun. She kissed me goodbye, another quick peck that felt like obligation, and headed for the door. Julia? I called after her. She turned back, hand on the doorknob. I love you. For just a moment, her composure cracked, and I saw something that might have been guilt flash across her face. I love you too, Adam. Then she was gone, and I was alone with my suspicions and Dave's advice echoing in my head. I waited exactly 15 minutes before getting in my car and driving toward downtown. The Grand Meridian was a luxury hotel in the heart of the city, the kind of place where business deals were made over expensive whiskey and politicians held fundraisers. The parking garage was already full of cars that cost more than my annual salary. BMWs, Mercedes, a few Teslas. I found a spot in the back and sat for a moment, questioning my sanity. What was I doing? Spying on my wife like some paranoid husband in a bad movie? But then I remembered the way she'd said boyfriend and the excitement in her voice when talking to Kara about seeing him again. I made my way to the hotel lobby, staying back from the main entrance to the ballroom where the reunion was being held. Through the glass doors, I could see people milling around with name tags and cocktails, everyone dressed to impress and trying to prove how successful they'd become since graduation. I spotted Julia almost immediately. She was standing near the bar, and even from a distance, I could see that radiant smile she'd been wearing all week. But she wasn't talking to a group of girlfriends or catching up with former classmates. She was with a man, tall, maybe 6'2", with salt and pepper hair and the kind of confident posture that screamed money. He was wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit and a smile that matched Julia's. They were standing close, closer than casual friends, and as I watched, he placed his hand on the small of her back in a gesture that was unmistakably intimate. My phone was in my hand before I consciously decided to use it. I started recording, my hands surprisingly steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. The man leaned down to whisper something in Julia's ear, and she threw back her head and laughed. It was the kind of laugh I remembered from our early dating days, spontaneous and joyful and completely uninhibited. Then he kissed her. Not a friendly peck on the cheek or a quick hello kiss. A real kiss, lips to lips, lasting several seconds. Julia didn't pull away. She didn't look surprised or uncomfortable. She kissed him back. I kept recording, my heart hammering so hard I was surprised the phone wasn't shaking. This wasn't innocent catching up with an old friend. This was an affair, and from the looks of it, it had been going on for a while. They moved onto the dance floor, and I repositioned myself to get a better view through the windows. The music was loud enough that I could hear it through the glass, some slow song from the 90s that had everyone swaying together. Julia and her mystery man moved like they'd done this before, her arms around his neck, his hands on her waist, their bodies pressed together in a way that left no doubt about their relationship. I took photos, recorded video, documented everything. Part of me felt sick doing it, but a larger part of me felt vindicated. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't paranoid. My wife was cheating on me, and now I had proof. Around 11 o'clock, I watched them leave the ballroom together. They didn't say goodbye to other classmates or linger at the bar. They walked out purposefully, his hand on her lower back, heading toward the elevators. I followed at a distance, staying in the lobby while they waited for an elevator. When the doors opened, they stepped inside, and just before the doors closed, I saw him press the button for the 15th floor. The hotel bar was still open, so I ordered a beer and tried to process what I just witnessed. My wife of 22 years, the mother of my children, was upstairs in a hotel room with another man. The woman who'd been embarrassed to introduce me as her husband was apparently comfortable enough with this guy to sleep with him. I finished my beer and headed home, driving through empty streets while my mind raced. What was I supposed to do now? Confront her when she came home? Pretend I didn't know anything? Call a lawyer? By the time I reached our house, I knew what I had to do. I went straight to our bedroom and opened Julia's laptop. She'd never been secretive about her passwords. We'd always trusted each other completely. The irony wasn't lost on me as I logged into her email account. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. A folder labeled GS, containing dozens of emails going back 6 months. Greg Stanton, according to his signature, the man from the reunion. The early emails were innocent enough. So great to reconnect on Facebook, and can't believe it's been 30 years. But they quickly escalated into something much more intimate. I can't stop thinking about you, read one from 3 weeks ago. These past few months have been like waking up from a long sleep. Julia's response made my stomach turn. I know exactly what you mean. Being with you makes me remember who I used to be before I got trapped in this suburban life. Trapped. She felt trapped by our marriage, our life together, our family. I kept reading, each email like a knife twist. They'd been meeting for coffee, then lunch, then dinner. They'd started sleeping together a month ago. Julia had told him she was planning to ask for a divorce after the reunion, that she just needed to figure out the logistics. The logistics? Like our 22-year marriage was a business deal to be dissolved. I printed the most damning emails, saved copies to a flash drive, and forwarded everything to my personal email account. Then I went to our closet and started packing. I didn't take much. A week's worth of clothes, my toiletries, important documents. I left my wedding ring on the dresser next to a note I wrote on hotel stationery I'd picked up from the lobby. Julia, I know about Greg. I know about the affair. I know why you were embarrassed to introduce me as your husband. Divorce papers will be filed Monday. Don't contact me. Don't try to explain. We're done. Adam. I also left printed copies of her emails and a flash drive with the photos and videos from the reunion. I wanted her to know exactly how much I knew and how thoroughly she'd been caught. My last stop was our home office, where I made copies of all our financial documents, account statements, and tax returns. If Julia wanted a divorce, she was going to get one, but it would be on my terms. I checked into a Holiday Inn across town and tried to sleep, knowing that in a few hours, Julia would come home to find her world turned upside down. My phone started ringing at 2:47 a.m. Julia's ringtone, the same song that had been playing when they danced together at the reunion. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again at 2:52 a.m. and 2:58 a.m. and 3:15 a.m. By morning, I had 17 missed calls and a string of text messages that started with "Adam, please call me," and escalated to "Where are you? We need to talk." I turned off my phone and went to breakfast at a diner near the hotel. The waitress was friendly, the coffee was strong, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. No walking on eggshells, no wondering what mood Julia would be in, no analyzing every conversation for hidden meanings. Around 10 a.m., I drove to Dave's house. His wife Sarah answered the door, took one look at my face, and immediately invited me in for coffee. "She cheated," I said without preamble. Dave set down his mug with a heavy thud. "Shit, man, I was hoping I was wrong." "Guy from high school. They've been having an affair for months. I caught them at the reunion last night." Sarah reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm so sorry, Adam. What are you going to do?" "Already did it. Moved out, left her the evidence, filing for divorce Monday." "Good," Dave said firmly. She made her choice. Now she gets to live with the consequences. We talked for an hour, Dave and Sarah offering their spare room, legal advice, emotional support. It felt good to have allies. people who understood that this wasn't my fault and that Julia's betrayal was inexcusable. Around noon, I drove to our kids' college and high school, respectively. Sophie was a freshman at the University of Minnesota, about an hour away. Tyler was a senior at Westfield High, the same school Julia had graduated from 30 years earlier. I picked up Tyler first, telling him I needed to talk to him about something important. He was a quiet kid, more interested in computers than people, but he had a sharp mind and a strong moral compass. "Your mom and I are getting divorced," I said as we sat in my car outside his school. Tyler's face went pale. "What? Why?" "She's been having an affair. I found out last night." "Mom's cheating on you?" His voice cracked with disbelief. "I'm sorry, son. I know this is hard to hear." Tyler stared out the windshield for a long moment, processing. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady but angry. "Where is she now?" "Home, I assume. Probably trying to figure out how to explain this." "Are you going to fight for custody?" "If I have to. But you're almost 18, and Sophie's already in college. You guys are old enough to decide where you want to live." Tyler nodded slowly. "I want to stay with you, Dad. What Mom did, that's not okay." We drove to the university to tell Sophie in person. She cried, which broke my heart, but she also hugged me tight and told me she was proud of me for not putting up with Julia's betrayal. "I noticed she'd been different lately," Sophie said. "Happier, but in a weird way, like she had some secret that made her feel superior to everyone else." "You don't have to choose sides," I told both kids. "She's still your mother." "She's also a cheater," Tyler said bluntly. "Actions have consequences." Sunday evening, I finally turned my phone back on. 43 missed calls, all from Julia. The voicemail started apologetic and quickly became desperate. "Adam, please, just let me explain. It's not what you think. I made a mistake, but we can work through this. Please don't throw away 22 years over one night." "You're being ridiculous. People make mistakes. That doesn't mean our marriage has to end." By the final message, recorded around 6 p.m., her tone had shifted to anger. "Fine, Adam. If you want to be dramatic about this, that's your choice. But don't expect me to beg. I deserve better than someone who won't even listen to my side of the story." I deleted all the messages without listening to them completely and blocked her number. Monday morning, I met with Patricia Morrison, one of the best divorce attorneys in the city. I'd done my research over the weekend, reading reviews and checking credentials. Julia might have connections in the advertising world, but I was going to make sure I had the best legal representation available. Patricia was a sharp woman in her 50s with silver hair and steel gray eyes. She listened to my story without interruption, occasionally taking notes on a yellow legal pad. "You have excellent documentation," she said when I finished. "The emails alone would be enough, but the photos and videos from the reunion really seal the deal. Minnesota is a no-fault divorce state, so the adultery won't affect the legal proceedings, but it will certainly help with public perception." "What do you mean?" "Your wife works in advertising, correct? Public relations is everything in that business. When word gets out about the affair, and it will get out, her professional reputation will take a hit." I hadn't considered that angle, but Patricia was right. Julia's career depended on her ability to manage public image and maintain client trust. A messy divorce involving infidelity wouldn't look good to potential clients. "How long will this take?" I asked. "With her cooperation, we could have everything finalized in 6 months. If she fights it," Patricia shrugged, "could be years. She won't fight it. She wants out of the marriage as much as I do." Patricia smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. "We'll see about that. In my experience, cheating spouses often change their tune when they realize what divorce is going to cost them." That afternoon, I had the papers served at Julia's office. I wasn't trying to embarrass her professionally, but I also wasn't going out of my way to protect her from the consequences of her choices. According to the process server, Julia had been in a client meeting when he arrived. Her assistant had to interrupt the meeting to tell her there was someone there with legal documents. The entire office had watched as she signed for the papers, her face turning bright red with humiliation. Good. Let her be embarrassed for once. Julia's best friend Kara called me Tuesday evening. I almost didn't answer. I'd been expecting Julia to use friends and family to try to reach me, but curiosity got the better of me. "Adam, what the hell is going on?" Kara's voice was sharp with accusation. "Julia is devastated. She says you moved out without warning and filed for divorce over some misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" I couldn't keep the disbelief out of my voice. "Is that what she's calling it?" "She said you saw her talking to an old friend at the reunion and jumped to the wrong conclusion." So Julia was lying to her friends, trying to control the narrative. I shouldn't have been surprised, but somehow I was. Kara, I have video of your best friend making out with Greg Stanton on the dance floor. I have emails where she talks about sleeping with him and planning to divorce me. This isn't a misunderstanding. The line went quiet for a long moment. Emails? Kara's voice was smaller now. 6 months worth. Pretty explicit stuff about how trapped she feels in our marriage and how being with Greg makes her feel alive again. Oh my God. Kara sounded genuinely shocked. She told me they were just friends, that you were being paranoid. She lied to you, just like she lied to me. I'm so sorry, Adam. I had no idea it had gone that far. I mean, she mentioned reconnecting with someone from high school, but she made it sound innocent. Nothing about this was innocent, Kara. After we hung up, I realized that Julia's lies were going to be a problem. If she was telling people I'd overreacted to an innocent friendship, she might be able to salvage her reputation and make me look like the bad guy. I needed to get ahead of the story. Wednesday morning, I called Julia's sister Michelle in Chicago. Michelle and I had always gotten along well. She was more grounded than Julia, less concerned with appearances and social status. Adam? Michelle sounded surprised to hear from me. Julia said you guys were having some problems, but she was pretty vague about details. We're getting divorced, Michelle. She's been having an affair. What? No way. Julia would never... I have proof. Photos, videos, emails. She's been sleeping with a guy from high school for months. Michelle was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was sad, but not entirely surprised. I wondered why she seemed so different lately. Happy, but in a secretive way. She's been telling people I overreacted to an innocent friendship. That's bullshit, and you know it. Julia doesn't do anything innocent when it comes to men. She never has. That was news to me. What do you mean? Come on, Adam. You know how she is. She needs constant male attention to feel good about herself. I always wondered how long it would take for her to get bored with marriage. I felt like an idiot. Had everyone seen this coming except me? I'm sorry this happened to you, Michelle continued, but honestly, you're probably better off without her. Thursday, I got a call from my mother-in-law. Eleanor Price had never been my biggest fan. She'd always thought Julia could have done better, but she'd been civil for the sake of family harmony. Adam, dear, Julia tells me you filed for divorce over some silly misunderstanding. It's not a misunderstanding, Eleanor. Julia's been having an affair. Oh. Eleanor's tone shifted immediately. I see. Well, that's disappointing. Disappointing. Like Julia had failed a test rather than destroyed our family. She's telling people I overreacted to an innocent friendship, I said. Yes, that's what she told me. But if you have proof of an affair... Eleanor trailed off, and I could practically hear her recalculating the family politics. I'm sorry, Adam. I raised her better than that. By Friday, word was spreading through our social circles. Julia's lies were being contradicted by the evidence I'd shared with key people, and her story was falling apart. Dave called to tell me that Julia had shown up at our office building, trying to convince people that I was having some kind of midlife crisis breakdown. She cornered Jim from accounting in the parking garage, Dave reported, started crying about how you'd abandoned her over nothing. Jim felt bad for her until I showed him one of the emails you forwarded me. What did he say? That she was lucky you didn't take out a billboard advertising her affair. Saturday morning, exactly 1 week after the reunion, Julia finally stopped trying to call me and sent a single text message. We need to talk. This has gone far enough. I responded with one word, no. An hour later, she showed up at the hotel where I was staying. I was in the lobby reading the newspaper when she walked in, looking haggard and desperate. She'd lost weight in the past week, and her usually perfect hair and makeup looked rushed. Adam, please, she said, sitting down across from me without invitation. Just give me 5 minutes to explain. Explain what? That you've been screwing Greg Stanton for 6 months? That you told him you felt trapped in our marriage? That you were planning to divorce me anyway? Her face crumpled. You read my emails. Every single one. Very enlightening. Those were private thoughts, taken out of context. What context makes I can't wait to start a new life with Greg? Okay, Julia. She stared at her hands, tears streaming down her face. I never meant for it to happen this way. How did you mean for it to happen? Were you planning to tell me about the affair, or just serve me divorce papers out of the blue? I was confused. Greg and I have history, and when we reconnected, it brought up all these feelings I thought I'd buried. So you decided to act on them while you were still married to me. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. I stood up, done with the conversation. You made your choice, Julia. You chose Greg over our family. Now you get to live with that decision. kids hate me," she whispered. "The kids are disappointed in you. There's a difference. They won't return my calls." "Maybe because you lied to them too. Sophie said you told her I was having a mental breakdown." Julia's face flushed red. "I was trying to protect them from the details." "You were trying to make me look like the bad guy, but the truth has a way of coming out." I left her sitting in the lobby and went upstairs to pack. It was time to stop hiding in hotels and start rebuilding my life. 2 weeks later, I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment across town. It wasn't much. Basic furniture, beige walls, the kind of place divorced dads lived in movies. But it was mine. Tyler spent most weekends with me, and Sophie came home from college specifically to help me decorate. "It needs color," she announced, standing in the middle of my living room with her hands on her hips. "An actual furniture instead of whatever this is." This was a folding table and 2 lawn chairs I'd bought at Target. "I'm not trying to impress anyone," I said. "It's just a place to sleep." "Dad, you're 43, not 93. You're allowed to have nice things." Sophie was right, of course. I'd been so focused on the practical aspects of divorce, lawyers, paperwork, dividing assets, that I hadn't thought about actually living again. We spent the weekend shopping for real furniture, paint, and what Sophie called grown-up decorations. By Sunday evening, the apartment looked like a home instead of a temporary shelter. "Much better," Sophie said, surveying our work. "Now you just need to start dating." "I'm not ready for that." "I didn't say you had to get married tomorrow, but eventually you're going to want companionship, and when that time comes, you'll want to live somewhere that doesn't look like a witness protection safe house." Monday morning brought news that made me smile for the first time in weeks. Patricia called to tell me that Julia was willing to accept our initial settlement offer without negotiation. "She wants this over quickly," Patricia explained, which suggests she's planning to remarry soon. Good for her. The sooner we're done, the better. There is one complication. She's asking for spousal support. I laughed out loud. Spousal support? She makes more money than I do. That's what I told her attorney, but apparently her income has taken a hit recently. It turned out that Julia's affair had become public knowledge in Minneapolis's tight-knit advertising community. 3 major clients had dropped Morrison and Associates after learning about Julia's personal drama, and the agency had been forced to reduce her role and salary. She brought this on herself, I told Patricia. I'm not paying spousal support to subsidize her new life with Greg. That's what I figured you'd say. I'll make it clear that spousal support is off the table. That afternoon, Dave stopped by my office with gossip from the building's rumor mill. Julia's been calling around, trying to find a new job, he reported, but word about the affair has spread pretty far. Apparently she had lunch with the creative director at Brennan and Associates last week, and he flat out told her they don't hire people with personal drama. That seems harsh. Maybe, but advertising is all about image management. Hard to trust someone to manage your company's reputation when they can't manage their own. I felt a brief flicker of sympathy for Julia, but it passed quickly. She'd made her choices, and now she was dealing with the consequences. I hadn't forced her to have an affair or lie to our friends and family about it. The divorce was finalized on a gray Thursday in November, exactly 2 months after the reunion. Julia and I met at the courthouse with our respective attorneys, signed the papers, and officially ended our 22-year marriage. Julia looked terrible. She'd lost more weight, and her usual polished appearance had been replaced by something that looked almost desperate. Greg wasn't with her, which I found interesting. I hope you're happy, she said as we left the courthouse. I'm not happy or unhappy, I replied honestly. I'm just done. The kids will never forgive me. That's between you and them. She started to say something else, then seemed to think better of it. We walked to our separate cars in silence, and that was the last conversation we ever had. Tyler graduated from high school that spring and chose to live with me while attending the University of Minnesota. Sophie transferred to a school closer to home, partly to save money and partly, I suspected, to keep an eye on me. Julia moved to Chicago, where her sister Michelle helped her find a job at a smaller advertising agency. She sent the kids birthday cards and Christmas presents, but they rarely responded. The damage to those relationships would take years to repair, if it ever could be. As for Greg Stanton, I heard through the grapevine that he'd broken up with Julia a month after the divorce was finalized. Apparently, the reality of dating a divorced woman with angry children and professional problems was less appealing than the fantasy of rekindling a high school romance. 6 months after the divorce, I ran into Kara at the grocery store. She looked embarrassed to see me, but we ended up talking for a few minutes in the produce section. How are you doing? She asked. Good. Really good, actually. I'm glad. I felt terrible about the whole thing. I should have realized what was really happening. You trusted your friend. That's not a character flaw. Kara nodded, looking relieved. For what it's worth, I think Julia realizes she made a huge mistake. She lost everything. Her marriage, her kids, her career, Greg. All for what? A few months of feeling like she was 18 again? Some mistakes you can't undo, I said. Yeah, I guess that's true. A year after the divorce, I was a different man. Not bitter or broken, as I'd expected to be, but stronger and more confident than I'd been in years. The apartment Sophie had helped me decorate had become a real home, filled with books I actually had time to read and hobbies I'd forgotten I enjoyed. I'd started woodworking again, something I hadn't done since college. My dining room table was covered with plans for a bookshelf I was building for Sophie's new apartment. Tyler had inherited my old love of hiking, and we spent most weekends exploring trails around Minnesota. You seem different, Sophie observed one Sunday evening as we cooked dinner together. Happier. I feel different. Lighter, I guess. Do you miss being married? It was a question I'd been asking myself a lot lately. I miss being married to the person I thought your mother was. But I don't miss walking on eggshells or wondering what I'd done wrong when she was in a bad mood. She called me last week, Sophie said carefully. This was the first time either of the kids had mentioned Julia in months. How is she? Not great. She's seeing a therapist, trying to figure out why she sabotaged her life. That's probably a good idea. She asked about you, whether you were dating anyone. I wasn't, though not for lack of opportunity. A few women at work had made it clear they were interested, and Dave's wife Sarah was constantly trying to set me up with her friends. But I wasn't ready yet, and I wasn't sure I ever would be. What did you tell her? That it wasn't any of her business. Sophie had become fiercely protective of me since the divorce, sometimes to an extent that worried me. She'd cut off all contact with Julia and refused to even discuss the possibility of reconciliation. You know, you don't have to choose sides forever, I told her. She's still your mother. She's the woman who gave birth to me, Sophie corrected, but mothers don't destroy their families for selfish reasons. Tyler felt the same way, though he was less vocal about it. Both kids had been hurt deeply by Julia's betrayal, not just of me, but of the family unit we'd built together. They felt like she'd thrown them away along with our marriage. That fall, I got a promotion at work. Nothing dramatic, but enough to move into a nicer apartment and start thinking about buying a house. Dave joked that divorce was the best thing that had ever happened to my career. You're actually present now, he explained. Before, you always seemed distracted, like you were worried about something at home. He was right. I'd spent years trying to manage Julia's moods and expectations, walking on eggshells to avoid conflict. Now I could focus all that energy on work, friends, and my kids. The second anniversary of the divorce passed without fanfare. I didn't mark the date or feel particularly emotional about it. It was just another day in a life that had become genuinely satisfying. That evening, Tyler called from college with news that surprised me. Mom wants to meet for coffee, he said. She's in town for some kind of work conference. Are you going to see her? I don't know. Part of me is curious about whether she's changed, but part of me thinks it's too little, too late. You should do whatever feels right for you, I told him. Don't worry about my feelings. What would you do if she wanted to meet with you? I thought about it for a moment. 2 years ago, the idea of seeing Julia would have filled me with anger or pain. Now, I felt nothing but mild indifference. I'd probably pass, I said honestly. Not out of anger, but because I don't see the point. We don't have anything to say to each other. Tyler ended up meeting Julia for coffee, and according to Sophie, it didn't go well. Julia had apparently spent most of the time talking about her therapy and her regrets, without really listening to how her actions had affected her children. She kept saying she was sorry, Sophie reported after talking to her brother, but it felt performative, like she was reading from a script her therapist gave her. I felt bad for all of them, Julia, Tyler, Sophie. Divorce was supposed to be about two adults ending their relationship, but kids always got caught in the crossfire, even adult kids. 3 years post-divorce, I finally started dating. Her name was Rebecca. She was a librarian at the university where Sophie was finishing her degree, and she had never been married. She was kind, intelligent, and refreshingly direct about what she wanted from life. I'm not looking to be anyone's rebound, she told me on our third date. If you're not over your ex-wife, that's fine. But let's figure that out now. I'm over her, I said, and realized it was completely true. I have been for a while. Rebecca and I took things slowly, partly because of my history, and partly because she was naturally cautious. But after 6 months of dating, She started spending weekends at my apartment, and after a year, we started talking about moving in together. The kids liked her, which was important to me. She didn't try to replace their mother or insert herself into family dynamics that didn't concern her. She was just herself, warm, funny, and completely comfortable with the fact that I came with baggage. "She's good for you," Sophie observed after a family dinner where Rebecca had helped Tyler with a research paper while I cooked. "You laugh more when she's around." It was true. Rebecca brought out a side of me that I'd forgotten existed, playful, optimistic, genuinely happy. With Julia, I'd always felt like I was performing, trying to be the husband she wanted instead of just being myself. 4 years after the divorce, I bought a house. Nothing fancy, but it had a workshop in the basement for my woodworking and a guest room for when the kids visited. Rebecca helped me pick it out, and while we weren't officially living together, she spent most nights there. The day I closed on the house, I got an unexpected text from Julia. "Heard about the house. Congratulations. You deserve to be happy?" It was the first contact we'd had since the divorce, and I stared at the message for a long time before responding with a simple, "Thank you." That evening, as Rebecca and I sat on the front porch of our new house drinking beer and watching the sunset, I realized that Julia had been right about one thing. I did deserve to be happy. It had just taken me a while to figure out what that looked like. 5 years after that night at the Grand Meridian, I received an invitation that made me laugh out loud. Westfield High School class of 1995, 35th reunion. "Are you going to go?" Rebecca asked, reading over my shoulder. "I didn't go to Westfield," I reminded her. "That was Julia's school." "But you could go as my guest," she said with a mischievous smile. "I graduated from Westfield in 1995. I'd forgotten that Rebecca was the same age as Julia, that they'd actually gone to high school together, though they hadn't known each other well at the time. "Wouldn't that be weird?" I asked. "Only if you make it weird. Besides, I'm curious to see how everyone turned out." The reunion was held at the same hotel where I'd discovered Julia's affair 5 years earlier. Walking into the Grand Meridian felt surreal, like stepping back in time, but not in a painful way. More like visiting a museum of someone else's life. Rebecca looked beautiful in a simple blue dress, confident and radiant in a way that had nothing to do with impressing old classmates. She introduced me to her former teachers and friends with genuine pride, never once seeming embarrassed or apologetic about our relationship. "This is Adam," she'd say. "He's the one I was telling you about." Halfway through the evening, I spotted Greg Stanton across the room. He looked older, grayer, and somehow smaller than I remembered. He was alone, nursing a drink at the bar and watching the dance floor with the expression of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. "That's him, isn't it?" Rebecca asked, following my gaze. "Julia's Greg? That's him? He looks miserable." She was right. Greg looked like a man who'd made a series of bad decisions and was still dealing with the consequences. I felt a brief moment of satisfaction, followed immediately by something that might have been pity. "Should we go say hello?" Rebecca asked. "God, no. What would be the point?" But as the evening wore on, Greg kept glancing in our direction. Finally, around 10 o'clock, he approached our table. "Adam Price?" he said, his voice uncertain. "Greg." I stood up and shook his hand, more out of politeness than warmth. "This is my girlfriend, Rebecca," I said, putting my arm around her waist. "Nice to meet you," Rebecca said graciously. Greg looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot. I wanted to apologize for what happened 5 years ago. I know I caused a lot of problems for your family." I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or ulterior motives, but he just looked tired and genuinely remorseful. "We all made choices," I said finally. "You and Julia made yours, and I made mine." "How is Julia?" Rebecca asked, and I could tell she was genuinely curious rather than being catty. Greg's face darkened. "I don't know. We haven't spoken in years." "I heard she moved to Chicago," I offered. "Yeah, that's what I heard too." Greg finished his drink in one gulp. "Look, I just wanted you to know that I realize what we did was wrong. I'm not proud of it." "Okay," I said, not sure what else he wanted from me. "Are you happy?" he asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. "Yes, I am." Greg nodded slowly, looking at Rebecca and then back at me. "Good, that's good." He walked away without another word, and I never saw him again. "That was unexpected," Rebecca said. "He looked like he wanted absolution." "Did you give it to him?" I thought about it. "I don't think that's mine to give. He has to live with his choices, just like everyone else." We danced to the same kind of music that had been playing 5 years earlier, but everything felt different now. Rebecca moved in my arms like she belonged there, laughing at my jokes and whispering observations about her former classmates that made me smile. "No regrets?" she asked as we swayed to a slow song. "About what?" "Any of it. The divorce, the drama, the way everything worked out." I looked around the ballroom at the same dance floor where I'd watched my marriage end and felt nothing but gratitude for the journey that had led me to this moment. "No regrets," I said, and meant it completely. On the drive home, Rebecca was quiet for a while before finally speaking. "I keep thinking about what Greg said, about choices." "What about it?" 5 years ago, Julia chose him over you. Tonight, he looked like a man who realized he'd won the wrong prize." She was right. Greg had gotten what he thought he wanted. Julia, the fantasy of reclaimed youth, the excitement of forbidden romance. But in the end, he'd lost everything that actually mattered. His marriage, his reputation, his self-respect. Meanwhile, I'd lost a wife who didn't value our marriage anyway and gained a life that was genuinely fulfilling. I had my kids' respect, work I enjoyed, a woman who loved me without reservation, and the kind of peace that comes from living authentically. "Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing," I said. Rebecca reached over and took my hand. "Sometimes it does." We drove home through the quiet streets of Minneapolis, past the hotel where my old life had ended and toward the house where my new life was just beginning. In the morning, I'd wake up next to a woman who'd never been embarrassed to introduce me as her boyfriend, and later her husband, and eventually the father of the children we'd have together. But that night, driving through the darkness with Rebecca's hand in mine, I was simply grateful for the unexpected gift of starting over. Julia had been wrong about one thing. I wasn't embarrassing at all. I was exactly who I was supposed to be,